going to get into the yeast protocol. So yeast overgrowth typically happens when we have an imbalance of bacteria in our stomach. Our gut flora has a lot of different bacteria, a lot of different yeast, and typically yeast is friendly. However, when certain things happen, like us taking some antibiotics or not eating the healthiest of foods, that can throw off the balance of our bacteria. And what ends up happening is that yeast sees an opportunity to grow. That's why we end up with yeast overgrowth, which can cause a lot of issues. It can affect your immune system. It could cause digestive issues. It could cause you to feel like low energy, have PMS, feel moody, feel like foggy brain, like you can't concentrate. And it's all due to the yeast overgrowth. Causes of yeast overgrowth, so using antibiotics or oral contraceptives can cause yeast to grow. Having a lot of sugar and a lot of starch can also cause yeast to grow, since the yeast feed off of the sugar. Being stressed lowers your immune system, which gives an opportunity for the yeast to overgrow. Overuse of antibiotics. So when we use antibiotics, that clears not only the bad bug or the bad bacteria that you might have, but it also clears away or kills off the good bacteria. So if we killed off our good bacteria, then the yeast, since they are opportunistic, find an opportunity to just overgrow. And chlorinated water as well. Okay, so in the yeast diet, what we want to do is we want to make sure that overall our diet is low in carbohydrates. So carbohydrate is anything that is a fruit, a starchy vegetable like potatoes, corn, any grain, so like any tortilla, any rice, quinoa is also carbohydrate, any beans, anything that has sugar, so any soda, any donuts, and any dairy product. So your yogurt, your milk, those are carbohydrates, and the carbohydrates turn into sugar, and the sugar feeds the yeast. So we want to starve off the yeast. That's why we want to go low carb. So yeast diet is low carb, no sugar. That's the goal. No yeast. So yeast spreads, we want to try to avoid them. We're going to limit starch. So starch is like your starchy vegetables. So again, your potatoes, corn, peas, that turns into sugar in our body. No artificial sweeteners or products, no vinegars. So if we have a salad, we don't really want to have like a balsamic vinaigrette with it because it's fermented and the yeast can feed off of it. We also want to limit fruit. So fruit is a healthy food. However, it does have natural sugar, and the natural sugar will feed the yeast. So we want to avoid that. So in this program, we want to do no fruit for the first 4 to 6 weeks. We can have vegetables, but again, we don't want to have the starchy vegetables, and we also don't want to have mushrooms because mushroom is a fungus, and the yeast can also feed off of the mushroom. We want to choose lean proteins. We want to choose good oils. Again, avoid dairy, caffeine as well. And we want to make sure that we're hydrated, 8 to 9 cups of water. Since we're going to be starving off the yeast, that means that they're going to be dying off. So we want to make sure that we're hydrated well enough to excrete through our urine the yeast that is being killed off. And that way it doesn't affect us, because if we don't do this, we might feel some adverse side effects like nausea, constipation, abdominal upset. So we want to avoid that just by making sure that we are well hydrated. And we also want to use salt. Okay, so one of the big things with the yeast diet is we want to make sure that we're eating well enough, or the right amount of calories, because since it's low carbohydrate, low like starches, typically women will lose weight on this diet, which for some women is great. They want to lose weight, but for other women, they're maybe already happy with their weight and they don't want to lose anymore. So just being mindful of that, since it's low carbohydrate, we still want to make sure that it's a nourishing meal that we're having. Okay, so again, no sugar. So any ingredient, if you read a nutrition label that has a OSE, that ends in OSE, is a sugar. So we don't want to do syrups, honey, high fructose corn syrup, right? So no soda, molasses, jelly also has sugar, dried fruit turns into sugar, gum also has sugar. So we want to avoid all sugar. So right now what I'm going to do is go over again what we want to avoid. So no sugar, no yeast. So baking and brewer's yeast. There's also no alcoholic beverages allowed, so no beer, wines, or liquor as well. And we want to limit our starches. So on this yeast protocol, we can have 2 to 3 servings per day, and a serving equals a half a cup. So if I'm gonna have sweet potatoes, let's say during lunch, and I put 1 cup, then that's 2 servings, right? Because half a cup is 1 serving. So if I put 1 cup, that's 2 servings. And I only get 2 to 3 servings a day. So that means I only have 1 more left. Okay, and this here in the bottom, a serving is half a cup of rice, half a cup of quinoa, half a cup of lentils. So be mindful of that as you're building your meals. We want to limit the starches. And again, we want to do this because it feeds the yeast and we're trying to starve the yeast. We don't want to do any artificial sweeteners, but we can use stevia. So stevia is the only one that we can use. We can do the drops or the pure extract. So if you want to sweeten maybe your beverage, this would be a good alternative. And we also don't want to do vinegars or any fermented foods. So pickles, olives, cheese, miso, ham, packaged meats. A dressing, if you do want to add a dressing, it should consist of olive oil and lemon. So again, no balsamic vinaigrette or any other type of vinaigrette because it's fermented and yeast ferment the food, so we just don't want to mix the two. And again, we want to limit fruit. So fruit is going to be limited to 1 piece per day. So just be mindful of that. And at the beginning, we want to try to avoid fruit overall for the first 4 weeks, if possible. If that seems a bit overwhelming, then we can do 1 piece of fruit per day. And be mindful. Some of us might think like a big watermelon is it's 1 watermelon, so it's one serving, but it's not, right? A serving is typically smaller, so a small apple, a small orange, 2 to 4 strawberries, half a cup of blueberries, blackberries, or raspberries. So just be mindful of the amount. And we want to choose vegetables. So these are I call them the free foods because we can have as much as we want. It's unlimited because they don't feed the yeast. So our meals are mainly going to be these non-starchy vegetables. And just remember the mushrooms are not allowed. So any vegetable that's not corn, potato, yams, peas, lentils, beans, pumpkin is considered free. So it's considered a non-starchy vegetable and we can add it to our meals. And protein. So protein is going to be very important. We want to make sure we have a protein at every meal. So eggs, lean meat, cold water fish such as salmon, halibut, chicken, turkey. We want to avoid all pork. And if we do have a protein powder, we want to make sure it's 100% a natured whey protein. So it can be added to a protein drink or if you choose to do cereal in the morning. Okay, but protein is going to be one of our staples in our meal. And we want to choose cold pressed oils only. So olive or organic coconut oil is preferred. You can use flax oil in a salad dressing or in protein drinks, but don't cook with it. And avoid all hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated fats and oils like margarine or canola oil. We want to stay away from those because it causes inflammation. So just sticking to olive or coconut oil is preferred. And we want to limit nuts and seeds to 1 ounce a day. If we do have nuts or seeds, for example, if we have almonds, we want to make sure that they're raw. So purchasing raw almonds is a good choice. And for now, we want to avoid peanuts, cashews, and pistachios. Also, dairy products. So dairy products turn into sugar. So any milk, cow's milk, dairy product we want to stay away from. With the exception of organic yogurt, we can have 1 cup of plain organic yogurt per day and no caffeine. We can have green tea, that's acceptable, but no cola drinks. If you do drink coffee, it could be decaf, and it's up to 1 cup per day. And you can have herbal tea. So any herbal tea that you would like, 1 to 3 cups per day is a good amount. And this tea here in the bottom, Palo d'Arco tea, is often recommended because it's an antifungal, and yeast is a fungus, right? It's a fungi. So it can help kill it off. So if you do have access to this tea, it would be a good idea to start implementing it. And again, we want to make sure that we're drinking enough water and that we're eating enough food to maintain our energy levels, because something that could happen is we start eating less. Okay, so what can you eat, right? We just went over what not to eat, and I did share a little bit about what to eat. But here you have the foods to include. So again, any protein, you can have non-dairy alternatives. So milk or yogurt that's made from nuts, like hemp seed, it could be rice, coconut, without added sugars, right? Artificial sweeteners, we want to try to avoid that. So when you do choose, let's say, almond milk, just make sure that it's unsweetened almond milk. And then grains, we want to stick to rice, quinoa, buckwheat if you feel comfortable with that, barley. And if you do have if you do have breads, you can have yeast-free breads. And fruit, we can have berries, lemon, and lime, but again, for the first couple of weeks, we want to try to avoid fruits. And vegetables are free. You can have as many as you like. And fats and oils, we went over this. We can have cold press oils. For nuts, again, raw nuts and seeds. Sweeteners, we can have stevia. And to add flavor to your food, you can have lemon, limes, raw apple cider vinegar, garlic, ginger, cloves, or cinnamon. Beverages, herbal teas are good, or water. And then medication and vitamins, we want to make sure that they're yeast and mold free vitamins. So for any of the supplements that I recommend, they're always going to be yeast free. So you don't have to worry about that. And if you have like any other homemade condiments, just make sure that you're not adding any vinegar or fermenting them. So the yeast protocol, this protocol is about 3 months long. We start with the yeast diet. So again, in this yeast diet that we just went over, we want to decrease sugar and carbohydrates to kill off the yeast. We usually do step 1 and step 2 together, which is a probiotic. So the probiotic helps build the healthy bacteria back into your gut. And this is going to really help the yeast stay into place, because the yeast are opportunistic. And if we don't have enough of the good bacteria in our gut, the yeast are going to want to grow. But if we have the good bacteria, that good bacteria is going to be like, no, like you can't grow more than, you're supposed to. So this is really going to help keep a good balance. And the probiotic also helps decrease inflammation. As the yeast start to die off, that can cause some inflammation. But if we have a good probiotic in place, that's going to really help. Okay, once we have step 1 and step 2 down, we're going to move on to step 3, which is an anti-yeast herbal. So I usually use Palo d'Arco, and I will share details in phase 2. And then we will continue to support the digestive system. So high fiber foods, plant-based, lean protein, low sugar, and the probiotic really helps. Okay, so we're going to go over phase 1. So this is going to be the first 30 days. Here in this list, you have the foods that you can eat. So I compiled it in one list because I know it can become overwhelming. So you can go back and access this list. So this is what you can eat in this first phase. So we have our non-starchy vegetables, the grains, fruit. Again, we want to try to avoid it for the first 3 to 4 weeks. Sweetener, the seeds, the animal protein, plant protein, non-dairy alternatives, and starchy veggies. So this is what we can have, okay? And over here, I shared how much to eat. So when it comes to the animal protein, non-starchy vegetables, cold pressed oil, herbs, tea, water, they're free, meaning that you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to measure it. But when it comes to the grains, the plant protein, the starchy veggies, these we do want to limit, and it's 2 to 3 half cups per day. So again, if I have, let's say for grains, I'm having rice. If I have 1 cup, then that means that I already had 2 servings, right? Because half a cup equals a serving. If I had a cup and a half, then I already had my 3 servings. So I can't really have any more of these in breakfast or dinner because I already used it up. Okay? And we want to limit fruit to 1 per day. Remember at the beginning, we kind of want to do 0, but if we can't do 0, then 1 per day is a good start. And here, if you don't remember, like, well, what foods are grains or what's a plant protein or what's a starchy vegetable, then you go back to this list and it shows you here, these are starchy vegetables, these are the plant proteins, and here in the bottom are the grains. So you know that from those 3, you want to have only 2 to 3 servings per day. Okay? So this is an example. If we have a salmon avocado bowl, we have our salmon, our avocado, our cabbage, cilantro, pickled onions, red onions, tomatoes, and half a cup of brown rice, and lemon juice optional. Okay, so the only thing here that I have to count is the brown rice. Everything else, like all of these vegetables, are free, meaning that the yeast won't feed off of them. Right? They're non-starchy vegetables. And if you get a little confused, just look over here. Non-starchy vegetables, anything that's on this list is free. It's not a problem. You don't have to count it. The only thing you have to count is the starchy vegetables, the grains, and the plant protein. And again, it shows you here. Okay, so all of this is free. The salmon, we know that protein. Here it says any animal protein is free. We don't have to count it, so don't worry about it. But the only thing would be the half cup brown rice. So that's a grain. And you know for grains, I can only have 2 to 3 half cups per day. So if I'm having half a cup over here, that means that I'm having one of my servings, right? One of my 3. So per day, I can have 1 cup and a half. So if I already had half a cup, I have 2 1/2 cups left. Okay. Okay, so what next? So in our session, we did go over what you would be starting with. So that is what I recommend you do for now, and go back to this presentation. And if you have any more questions, look over the slides and the handouts. And you can also look at the video on building your bowl. That's going to really help. If you're just starting and aren't really sure how to build your meals, that's a good place to start. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be in touch.